The first sign that I wasn't alone happened even before I crossed the temple's threshold. It wasn't a clear sound, nor a shadow shifting between the trees. It was something subtler, almost imperceptibly, like a whisper caught in the wind that seemed to pronounce my name. I stopped halfway down the path, flashlight in one hand and my backpack tapping lightly against my back, trying to convince myself it was only my tired mind playing tricks on me. But the sensation persisted, as if a gigantic presence were watching me from somewhere my eyes couldn't yet detect. When I finally pushed the stone door open, a blast of icy air wrapped around me. The inside of the temple was drowned in thick gloom, broken only by the faint light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. I stepped in, and the walls answered with an echo that didn't match my movements. It was as if another step, much heavier, had replied to mine from some hidden corner. My heart tightened, pounding with an intensity that almost hurt. Something was there, something immense. The darkness seemed to breathe with me. Every time I inhaled, the silence tensed. Every time I exhaled, I had the impression that another presence did the same, but with a volume of air incomparably greater, as if it were a being capable of shifting the wind just by existing. As I advanced, my flashlight revealed fragments of murals showing tiny human figures surrounding a monumental silhouette, a colossal woman whose presence seemed both blessed and feared. No face had been carved, only the vague suggestion of gigantic eyes that, even without being drawn, felt like they were watching me. A shiver crawled down my spine. Even so, I kept walking. Each step seemed to attract another whisper. It didn't come from any single point. It was as if the entire temple murmured, as if the stones remembered a name they no longer dared to speak aloud after centuries of silence. My flashlight flickered, fighting against the darkness, and at the end of the corridor, a circular chamber appeared. The center was dominated by a massive altar, covered in ancient inscriptions that emitted a faint glow. Resting atop it was something that made my breath stop completely. A colossal form, reclining. For a brief moment, I thought it was just a statuesque, impossibly large sculpture, even for the ambition of a lost empire. But the way her hair cascaded in golden waves over the edges of the altar, the soft, almost lifelike glow of her dust-covered skin, and the ruby fabric draped over her body, none of it had the stiffness of stone. I felt the air condense around me as if an ancient force were slowly awakening. I stepped closer. The beam of my flashlight landed on her sleeping face. That was when it happened. The altar vibrated. At first like a light tremor, then like a heartbeat. The inscriptions flared at once, shining with a pearly glow that illuminated her gigantic features. Her chest large as a carved hillside rose in a deep inhale and exhaled. That sigh shook the entire ruin. Dust rained from above, and my flashlight slipped from my hands, rolling across the floor as the colossal figure moved for the first time in what must have been centuries. Her eyelids trembled. The scene hung suspended, caught between fear and the impossible. When she opened her eyes, I no longer had control of my legs. I could only stare. Her irises glimmered like lakes of liquid amber in the altar's revived light. They were not the eyes of a statue. Not the eyes of someone asleep. They were eyes that recognized me. Her voice came as a soft, deep, enveloping echo. At last, I felt the world shrink around me. Who are you? I managed to stammer. The gigantic woman slowly lifted her torso, moving with a weight that made the ground tremble. The ruby cloth slid like an ancient river, revealing her majestic, perfect figure too real to have been created by human hands. She tilted her head and looked at me as if she had awaited this moment with cosmic patience. I was called Ashaluna, guardian of the threshold. And you, her lips curved into a gentle, radiant smile. You are the one I have waited for. For centuries? The echo of her words wrapped around the temple and around my entire destiny. I never imagined the human heart could beat so hard without breaking. As Ashaluna rose from the altar, her impossible height reaching nearly halfway up the cracked dome, I felt every fiber of my being sway between awe and a kind of spiritual vertigo. The pearly light emanating from the ancient inscriptions wrapped around her like a living halo, revealing every detail of her warm skin, every monumental curve beneath the ruby fabrics that looked as if they were made to drape an entire sunrise. She watched me in silence, and that gaze had weight. It was like a mountain covered in gold, steadying me with the gentleness of a butterfly. I felt small, tiny, almost insignificant at the same time. Chosen. A disturbing duality. I could barely move my lips. Why me? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Ashaluna tilted her head slightly, her hair flowing until it spilled beyond the altar like rivers of trapped light. Because you were called, she answered with profound calm. Not by me, but by the entanglement of our destinies. The chamber vibrated barely noticeable, as if those destinies were already beginning to adjust to a new shape. She extended a hand toward Mia, huge hand, soft in appearance, with lines that looked carved by a divine artisan. Her open palm was like a glowing platform inviting me closer. I didn't dare, not yet. Ashaluna noticed my tension. You are not here to serve me, nor to run from me, she said, in a tone that sounded nearly like a whisper, yet resonated through the entire temple. You are here to understand. The word understand hung in the air, and with it came a deep unease. Understand what? I asked. She shifted her gaze toward the temple walls, which suddenly seemed to awaken, revealing figures I hadn't seen before. They were murals animated by the light, scenes of ancient cities, tiny people raising their hands toward giant women as majestic as Ashaluna. Other scenes showed portals floating over mountains, starlight creatures, lines of colossal guardians walking beneath a sun that wasn't ours. The world you know is not the only one, she said. There was a time when the paths were open. A time when we giants crossed to protect, to guide, to learn from the small worlds that bloomed beyond. I breathed deeply, trying to process what I was seeing. That looks like mythology. Ashaluna smiled with a tenderness that made my chest tremble. All mythologies are born from distorted memories, from encounters like ours. Her words pierced through me like an incomplete revelation, something I needed to grasp but couldn't yet fit into my mind. The murals glowed brighter and brighter, telling a story that seemed to come alive. But if you existed in so many worlds, what happened? I asked. The altar darkened for a moment, and Ashaluna lowered her gaze as if the shadow of a painful past drifted across her enormous form. The paths closed, she said in a deep tone. And we were trapped in temples like this one, suspended between sleep and waking, waiting for someone who could awaken us not through force, but through presence. The way she said presence made a strange warmth rise in my chest, a mixture of humility and responsibility I had never felt before. I tried to step back, overwhelmed, but I'm not anyone special, I said with almost childlike sincerity. Ashaluna lowered her face until it was closer to mine. Her proximity was colossal, and yet I felt no threat, only a profound mystery. For intertwined destinies, there is no special or ordinary. There is only what is necessary. Her amber eyes glowed intense and gentle all at once. And you are necessary. The temple's vibration intensified. The air grew warmer. The inscriptions around the altar began to shift, as if responding to her voice and to my presence at the same time. I felt something pushing me forward, not physically, but emotionally, as if an invisible force wanted me closer to her. What? What do you want me to do? I asked. She extended her hand again, but this time with a calmness that carried immense trust. Just give me your hand, she said, and I will show you what was and what can still be. I looked at that gigantic palm, glowing with a light that seemed to come from another world. And for the first time since I'd entered the temple, I felt the fear recede, making room for a deep, almost sacred curiosity. I took one step, then another, and I lifted my hand toward Ash. When my hand touched hers, a warm current rushed up my arm as if my skin had been dipped into liquid light. Ashaluna's palm, gigantic and soft, was neither cold nor stone-like. It held the living warmth of a sunrise. Her touch was delicate, almost reverent, as though she feared harming me despite her colossal size. That was when I understood that her physical greatness wasn't a symbol of violence, but of a strange harmony that challenged my deepest fears. The inscriptions around the altar began to slowly rotate, releasing sparks of light that floated in the air like fireflies suspended in a dream. Ashaluna gently curled her fingers around my hand, not to trap it, but to protect it. "Breathe," she asked, her voice so soft it felt like it brushed against my thoughts. I did, and the temple responded. The vibration steadied, becoming rhythmic like an ancient heartbeat. For a moment, I felt as though my feet were no longer standing on stone, but on a lighter, almost ethereal surface. The walls dissolved into a golden glow, and before I could understand what was happening, a wave of light surged from the altar and wrapped around me completely. The world changed. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in an impossible landscape, a golden valley stretching beyond the horizon, filled with crystal mountains and trees, whose leaves looked like liquid mirrors. The sky shifted through dancing colors, violets becoming blues, blues turning into gold. Ashaluna stood beside me, even more imposing against that backdrop, yet she looked at home. "This is one of the paths," she explained. "A fragment of the past that still remembers who we were." I turned slowly in place, overwhelmed by the beauty. "This can't be real," I said. "It is," she replied with a serene smile. "As real as you and me." In that strange world, gigantic figures like her walked in the distance. Colossal women of different shapes and splendid garments, some wearing blue robes adorned with celestial symbols, others clothed in living armor that seemed to breathe. All of them radiated a presence both powerful and peaceful. "They were my sisters," Ashaluna said. "Guardians of the paths, protectors of the bond between worlds." I watched, fascinated. Far off, one of the giants bowed her head toward another who seemed wounded. Several approached to help her, their gestures filled with empathy. The scene carried a blend of nobility and sorrow. "What happened to them?" I asked. The landscape dimmed slightly, as though my question had awakened ancient shadows. Ashaluna gazed toward the horizon, her expression caught between resignation and nostalgia. "The paths fell out of balance. Forces we did not understand began devouring the energy that bound the worlds together. One by one, my sisters fell into slumber. Those who tried to resist disappeared into the darkness." As she spoke, the Golden Valley displayed distorted images, giants facing a void that consumed everything in its path. Collapsing portals, temples like hers sealing shut as blue lights faded one by one. "I was one of the last," she continued. "They entrusted me with protecting the spark of my world, hiding it in a temple that would remain isolated from the rest. There, I waited." I turned to her. "And you were waiting for me?" I asked quietly. Ashaluna looked at me with a depth that pierced through me. "Not for you, specifically. I waited for someone whose spirit could resonate with mine. Someone who could reactivate the energy of the path, and you answered." The world began to brighten again. The gigantic figures blurred, turning into shimmering dust that floated around us. Ashaluna leaned down slightly, bringing her face closer to mine. Her amber eyes seemed to reflect fragments of that broken universe. "You are more than an accidental visitor," she said. "You are the bridge." I felt an emotional vertigo, as if my very identity were expanding beyond what I believed possible. "I don't know if I'm capable," I admitted. "No one knows at the beginning," she replied. "But the paths are awakening. And with you, so am I." The valley began to fade, and a golden swirl enveloped us. "What's happening?" I asked. Ashaluna gently closed her fingers around my hand. "I'm going to show you the final truth, and after that, you will choose." The light swallowed us, the temple returned to my sight. But something in beyond, in Ashaluna, had changed forever. Returning to the temple felt like waking from a dream I didn't want to leave. The golden light of the path faded slowly, replaced once more by the soft shadows of the ruins, the distant echo of falling stones. The ancient scent that had seeped into the walls over centuries. But something was different. The air seemed to vibrate with a new pulse, as if the temple had recovered a heartbeat lost for ages. Ashaluna stood before me now, towering and majestic, so tall that her head nearly reached the cracked dome above. The energy of the path still glimmered faintly on her skin, as though a distant sunrise continued reflecting off her. She looked at me with a mixture of pride and tenderness, as if my mere presence had returned to her a part of herself she once believed extinguished. "You're not trembling," she said softly. I stepped a little closer, barely aware of my own movements. "I don't have a reason to," I replied. "I saw your world and I understood it. At least, a little." Ashaluna lowered her gaze, and a deep expression not sad, but ancient crossed her face. "What you saw is only a shadow. There is more, much more. And what's coming requires a decision no human has made in millennia." I swallowed, trying to stay steady. "Tell me what I must do." She took a deep breath, and that inhale moved the air like a wave. Then she knelt to be closer to me. Her knees sent a soft tremor through the ground. Her height was still immense, but her face was now near enough for me to see the golden flecks glowing in her irises like embers dancing beneath the wind. "The paths can feel my awakening," she explained. "And if I am awake, the threshold will also begin to open." Her voice took on a grave tone. "I am not the only one who can awaken." The words froze my blood. "You mean your sisters?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "No, I mean what destroyed the paths?" A silent shiver swept across the temple, as if something far away on, yet far too close, had heard that word. Ashaluna lowered her voice even more. "The void you saw wasn't just destruction. It was a being, a consciousness, a shadow that advances by consuming entire worlds. When the paths closed, it was to keep it from spreading further." A weight fell onto my chest. "And it's waking too." "Yes," she whispered, her voice resonating in my bones. "It will awaken when I do completely. And only a bond between a guardian and a human can keep it sealed." The idea struck me like a storm. "A bond?" I repeated. "A connection formed through will, not fear. A link in which two worlds unite." There was something in her tone that wasn't romantic or intimate, but spiritual, sacred, like a pact between souls, a bridge deeper than anything physical. And that bond, I'm the one who has to form it. Ashaluna nodded slowly. "Your spirit resonated with mine even before you crossed the temple door." I wasn't searching for a hero, nor a warrior, nor a wise man. I only needed someone who could listen, who could feel, who could face the unknown without shutting themselves off from it. I stayed silent, feeling the weight of her words wrap around my mind. "If I accept," I finally asked, "what happens?" Ashaluna extended her hand, the same colossal palm I had touched before. But now its light was stronger, more alive. "The bond will allow me to regain my strength. It will awaken part of the paths, not all, but enough to sustain them a little longer. And most importantly, it will prevent the shadow from crossing into your world." And if I don't accept, Ashaluna closed her eyes for a moment. "The threshold will open regardless. I will not be able to contain it alone, and your world will be the first to disappear." Silence fell like a heavy mantle. I took a deep breath, trying to organize the storm inside me. Fear, doubt, awe, a strange compassion for this colossal woman who had waited centuries without knowing who she would find. And above all, a certainty that surprised me. "I want to do it," I said. Ashaluna opened her eyes, and in them I saw a glow I couldn't describe. "Are you sure?" "Not about the future," I said. "But I am sure I can't turn my back after everything you showed me." The altar's light began to intensify, responding to my decision. Then she murmured, "Prepare yourself, because the bond will change what you are, and what I am." As her hand descended toward me, the temple itself seemed to lean in our direction, as if the universe were holding its breath. The decision was made. Ashaluna's hand descended toward me like an entire sunrise lowering from the sky. The ruby light surrounding her skin glowed with growing intensity, pulsing in rhythm with something that wasn't just a ritual, but a rebirth. The temple vibrated softly, as though every stone were remembering its ancient purpose. My breathing was unsteady, yet my mind felt strangely calm. I had made my decision. When I touched her palm for the second time, the world shattered into light. A golden wave burst from the center of the altar, wrapping my body in a warmth that didn't burn, one that expanded. It felt as if my thoughts were widening, as if I could hear a distant echo that didn't belong to this world. Ashaluna closed her eyes, and a deep expression of relief crossed her gigantic face. "The bond has begun," she murmured, her voice trembling not with fear, but with contained emotion. The light climbed up her arm, traveling across the monumental form of the guardian. I watched her skin regain a vibrant glow, her amber eyes lighting from within, like an ancient flame rekindling after centuries of darkness. The inscriptions across the temple ignited in an explosion of brilliance, revealing symbols that swirled around us like living constellations. I felt an internal pulling, invisible thread linking my chest to hers, a connection that went far beyond the physical. There was no pain, but an emotional vertigo so intense it forced me to close my eyes. Because by joining with her, I could feel her loneliness, her hope, her endless sleep filled with echoes of lost worlds, and now her awakening. When I opened my eyes, Ashaluna was looking at me with a tenderness so immense it nearly brought me to my knees. "You did it," she said. "We are one in spirit, a bridge, a spark of life." The temple responded with a soft roar, like distant thunder announcing the birth of a luminous storm. The light from the altar shot upward toward the cracked dome, escaping into the sky like a radiant pillar. But not everything was light. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision. A dark whisper cut through the air like a torn murmur. Ashaluna narrowed her eyes. "The void has already sensed us." Her words froze my blood. At the far end of the temple, where darkness clung between collapsed columns, a nebulous shape began to emerge, amorphous, like living smoke searching for a vessel. It had no face, yet it radiated a presence that made me instinctively step back. It was as though absence itself had gained consciousness. I trembled. "Ashaluna, what is that?" "The echo of the abyss," she answered. "A shadow sent to test our bond. If it breaks it, the threshold will open completely." The shadow advanced, stretching like a dark veil, trying to tear me away from her. Ashaluna extended her massive hand between us, creating a barrier of light. "Stay with me," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "Only together can we resist it." The bond between us began to burn with strength, a warm current intensifying with every breath I took. I felt my presence turning into a rush of energy flowing into her. Ashaluna, in turn, amplified it, sending it against the shadow, threatening us. The abyss screamed without sound. Light exploded. The entire temple shook as if it were alive. Ashaluna pressed her hand to the ground, releasing a golden wave that swept across the chamber. The shadow writhed, attempting to slip away, but the bond blazed brighter. I closed my eyes, feeling my energy merge with hers, two flames fusing to confront an endless night. One final burst, a silent scream, and the shadow crumbled into tiny particles that dissolved into the air. Silence. A deep, sacred silence. Ashaluna lowered herself carefully so as not to break the altar, placing her hand near me. Her amber eyes flickered as if containing entire galaxies. "We endured," she whispered, emotion trembling in her voice. "The threshold will remain closed. For now." I drew a deep breath, my heart racing not from fear, but from the magnitude of what I had experienced. "So, it worked." "Yes," she replied with a serene smile. "But remember this, the abyss never stops searching. As long as our bond exists, we will fight together, your world and mine." The temple's light began to fade slowly, returning to its natural glow. Ashaluna leaned in closer, so near I could feel the soft wind stirred by her breathing. "Thank you for not turning your back on the mystery," she said, her tone rich with profound emotion. "And thank you for waking me." I stood there looking up at this colossal guardian, who now shared a bond with me, realizing that my life would never be the same. A part of me feared the future, another part longed for it because something inside me whispered that this story had only just begun. And high above, in the cracked dome, a fissure flashed with blue light like an eye awakening, a warning, a reminder, and perhaps a promise. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. That helps us keep bringing you enchanting stories like this one to brighten your day. And tell us in the comments which city of the world you're listening from. See you next time.